In the early 20th century, a new chapter began for Iran, then known as Persia. A military officer, Riza Khan, rose through the ranks. In 1921, he led a coup d'état, and by 1925, he had deposed the last ruler of the Qajar dynasty, proclaiming himself Shah of Iran and founding the Pahlavi dynasty. As Riza Shah Pahlavi, he embarked on an ambitious campaign of modernization. His goal was to build a strong, centralized state modeled after Western nations. He introduced secular reforms, expanded industry, and built national infrastructure like the Trans-Iranian Railway. Women were encouraged to enter public life and education, and the traditional veil was discouraged. However, his rule was authoritarian. He suppressed dissent, curtailed the power of the clergy, and fostered a strong sense of Persian nationalism. His reign laid the groundwork for a modern nation-state, but also created deep social and political tensions that would shape Iran's future for decades to come. Riza Shah's relationship with the Allied powers became strained during World War II. His perceived pro-German sympathies led to the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran in 1941. Fearing for the future of his dynasty, he was forced to abdicate in favor of his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The new Shah's early reign was marked by political instability and foreign influence. Power was not concentrated in his hands, but was contested by the parliament, known as the Majlis, and a series of prime ministers. This period saw the rise of a powerful nationalist movement led by Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. In 1951, Mossadegh nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which had controlled Iran's vast oil reserves for decades. This act was celebrated in Iran as a declaration of economic independence, but provoked a crisis with Britain, which imposed a crippling embargo on Iranian oil, bringing the nation's economy to a standstill. The oil nationalization crisis culminated in 1953 with a coup d'état, orchestrated by British and American intelligence agencies. Known as Operation Ajax, Prime Minister Mossadegh was overthrown and arrested, and the Shah's power was restored and greatly consolidated. From this point on, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi ruled with an increasingly autocratic hand, sidelining the Majlis and relying on his powerful secret police, the Savak, to crush opposition. With a steady flow of oil revenue, he launched the White Revolution in 1963, a series of far-reaching social and economic reforms. These included land reform, women's suffrage, and literacy campaigns. The country experienced rapid economic growth and urbanization. Glistening skyscrapers, modern highways, and a growing middle class became symbols of the new Iran. The Shah envisioned his country as a major global power, the great civilization. Despite the economic progress, discontent simmered beneath the surface. The Shah's reforms alienated traditional segments of society, particularly the clergy, who saw their influence diminish. His autocratic rule and the brutal tactics of the Savak suppressed all forms of political dissent, creating a vacuum that was filled by radical ideologies. One of the most vocal critics was a charismatic cleric who had been exiled in 1964, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. From his exile in Iraq and later France, Khomeini's sermons and writings were smuggled into Iran. He denounced the Shah as a puppet of the United States, condemned the westernization of Iranian culture, and called for the establishment of an Islamic government. His message resonated with millions who felt left behind by the modernization drive or were outraged by the regime's corruption and repression. By the late 1970s, a potent mix of economic troubles and widespread political frustration was reaching its boiling point. In 1978, mass protests erupted across Iran. What began as small demonstrations quickly grew into a nationwide revolutionary movement. The Shah's regime responded with force, but the crackdown only fueled the public's anger. Millions took to the streets, demanding an end to the monarchy. The diverse opposition included secular liberals, leftists, and, most prominently, Islamists inspired by Ayatollah Khomeini. By January 1979, the Shah's authority had collapsed. He and his family fled the country, never to return. 2 weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini made a triumphant return to Iran, greeted by massive crowds. The revolution had succeeded. In April 1979, a referendum was held, and Iranians overwhelmingly voted to abolish the monarchy and establish an Islamic republic. The 2,500-year-old Persian monarchy had come to an end, heralding a new, uncertain era for Iran. The immediate aftermath of the revolution was a time of turmoil and power struggles. Various factions vied for control of the new state. Ultimately, the clergy, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, consolidated their power. They established a new constitution based on Khomeini's principle of Vilayat-e-Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which gave the supreme leader ultimate authority over the state. Secular and leftist groups were systematically purged. In November 1979, a group of radical students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage for 444 days. This event, known as the Iran hostage crisis, severed relations with the United States and isolated Iran on the international stage. It defined the new republic's confrontational stance towards the West, which Khomeini famously dubbed the Great Satan. Just as the new government was solidifying its grip on power, a devastating conflict erupted. In September 1980, neighboring Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded Iran. The stated goal was to seize control of the disputed Shatt al-Arab waterway, but the invasion was also an attempt to exploit the post-revolutionary chaos in Iran. The Iran-Iraq War became one of the longest and bloodiest conventional wars of the 20th century, lasting for 8 years. It was a brutal conflict characterized by trench warfare, chemical weapons attacks, and human wave assaults. The war fostered a fierce sense of national unity and religious fervor in Iran, strengthening the Islamic Republic's hold on power. However, it came at a staggering cost, with hundreds of thousands of casualties and immense economic devastation. A UN-brokered ceasefire finally ended the fighting in 1988, with no clear victor. The end of the war coincided with a pivotal moment in Iran's history. In 1989, Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, passed away. His death left a massive power vacuum. The Assembly of Experts chose Ali Khamenei, who had served as president, as the new supreme leader. The 1990s were a period of reconstruction and gradual change. President Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani focused on rebuilding the war-torn economy, pursuing more pragmatic policies. This was followed by the presidency of Mohammad Khatami, a reformist. In 1997, his election signaled a public desire for greater social and political freedoms. The Khatami era saw a cultural thaw, with a more relaxed social atmosphere and a flourishing of civil society. However, the reform movement faced stiff resistance from conservative hardliners who controlled key institutions like the judiciary and the Guardian Council, blocking many of Khatami's proposed changes. The pendulum swung back towards conservatism in the 2000s with the election of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as president in 2005. A populist hardliner, Ahmadinejad's presidency was marked by confrontational rhetoric, particularly towards the West, and a controversial nuclear program. His disputed re-election in 2009 triggered the largest protests since the 1979 revolution, known as the Green Movement. Millions of Iranians took to the streets to protest alleged election fraud. The government responded with a severe crackdown, arresting thousands and suppressing the movement. The events of 2009 exposed deep divisions within Iranian society and the state. In 2013, the election of Hassan Rouhani, a moderate cleric, ushered in a new phase of diplomacy. His government successfully negotiated the 2015 nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA, with world powers, agreeing to limit its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of international sanctions. Today, Iran remains a complex and dynamic nation at a crossroads. The withdrawal of the United States from the nuclear deal in 2018 and the reimposition of sanctions have plunged the country into a severe economic crisis, fueling widespread public discontent. A new generation of Iranians, connected to the world through the internet, is increasingly vocal in its demands for social change and economic opportunity. The country is governed by a unique system of clerical authority and republican institutions, a constant balancing act between conservative and reformist forces. From the modernizing ambitions of the Pahlavi Shahs to the revolutionary fervor that created the Islamic Republic, Iran's modern history is a story of profound transformation, struggle, and resilience. Its future, shaped by these powerful historical forces, continues to unfold. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into world history.